It's a strange thought. An entire species gone forever, not just a few individuals. Not a family or a tribe, but everyone, every last one of them. We tend to imagine dramatic ends. A giant asteroid, a supervolcano, a terrible war. But what if it's quieter than that? What if the end comes not with a bang, but with a prolonged, gnawing hunger? Could a simple lack of food have doomed them? The answer, like most things in our deep past, is complicated. But it's closer to yes than you might think. Food is the engine of life. It's not just a nice to have. It is everything. Without a steady, reliable source of calories, nothing else works. You can't raise children, you can't fight off disease, you can't keep your body warm through a brutal winter. And you certainly can't fuel the most expensive organ ever developed by nature, the human brain. The brain is a hungry organ. Your brain right now is burning about 20% of your daily calories, even though it's only 2% of your body weight. For our ancestors, with their physically demanding lives, that was a huge energetic cost. That brain allowed them to make tools, to plan hunts, to communicate and build social bonds. It was their greatest asset, but it was also their greatest liability. It had to be paid for, every single day, with food. So, when we look back at the fossil record, at the long line of hominins who came before us, we see a story of success and failure written in the language of energy. Species that found a good food source thrived and spread. Species that lost their food source, or failed to adapt when it changed, dwindled and vanished. It's the fundamental rule of the game. Eat, or be deleted from the story. Let's not talk about it in the abstract. Let's talk about them, our cousins. The other kinds of humans who walk the earth. The most famous are the Neanderthals. They weren't the brutish cavemen of old cartoons. They were intelligent, sophisticated, and incredibly tough. They survived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, a feat that makes our own civilization look like a brief flash in the pan. They had brains as large as ours, or even larger. They made complex stone tools. They hunted huge, dangerous animals. They controlled fire. They buried their dead. They were, by any measure, a success story, and then they were gone. Around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared. It happened relatively quickly after modern humans, our direct ancestors, arrived in Europe. For a long time, the popular idea was that we killed them, that our superior intellect and weapons led to a genocidal war. But the evidence for widespread violence between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens is thin. It probably happened sometimes, but it's unlikely to be the whole story. The real story might be about what was on the dinner table. What did Neanderthals eat? Mostly meat. A lot of it. Chemical analysis of their bones tells a clear story. They were top-level carnivores. Their diet looked more like that of a wolf pack than a modern human hunter-gatherer. They specialized in hunting large game. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant elk, bison. These were walking mountains of calories. A successful mammoth hunt could feed a clan for weeks. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy, and for a long time it worked. They were built for it. Their bodies were shorter, stockier, and more muscular than ours. This build was great for conserving heat in the cold climate and for the raw power needed for close-quarters ambush hunting with heavy spears. They were the apex predators of their world. Here's the problem with being a specialist. Your success is tied to the fate of your specialty. If the mammoths are plentiful, life is good. But what happens when the mammoths disappear? The climate of the last ice age was not a stable, deep freeze. It was incredibly volatile. It went through periods of rapid, dramatic change. Scientists call them Dansgaard-Oeschger events. Within a few decades, the average temperature could swing by several degrees. This would have been devastating for the ecosystems of the time. A sudden warming spell might cause the vast, open, steppy grasslands home to the megafauna to be replaced by forests. A sudden cold snap could kill off entire herds. For the Neanderthals, this climate chaos meant their food source was unpredictable. The mammoth herds might move away. The rhinos might die off. The forest might close in, making it harder to hunt the big animals that remained. Their entire survival strategy was suddenly on shaky ground. They were physically and technologically adapted for one type of hunting, one type of food. When that food became scarce, they were in trouble. Now, add us to the picture. Homo sapiens, our ancestors who moved into Europe, were different. They were generalists. They were omnivores in the truest sense of the word. Yes, they hunted mammoths when they could. But they also ate everything else. They hunted deer and boar in the forest. They trapped rabbits and birds. They fished in the rivers and collected shellfish on the coasts. They knew which plants were edible, which roots to dig for, which nuts were safe. Their bone chemistry shows a much broader diet than the Neanderthals. This dietary flexibility was our superpower. If the mammoths left, it was a problem, but not a catastrophe. We could just focus more on catching fish or trapping rabbits. Our technology reflected this. We didn't just have heavy thrusting spears, we developed lighter throwing spears, and eventually the lat or spear throw, which allowed us to kill animals from a safer distance. We invented nets for catching birds and fish. We made needles from bone to sew fitted clothing, which meant we spent less energy just staying warm. We had a bigger, more diverse toolkit for solving the problem of getting food. So imagine two groups of people living in the same changing landscape. One group, the Neanderthals, is desperately searching for the big game that is becoming rarer and rarer. They are burning a huge number of calories every day just to stay alive, because their bigger bodies require more fuel. Every failed hunt pushes them closer to the edge. The other group, Homo sapiens, is also finding it harder to hunt big game. But they are supplementing their diet with fish from the river. They are setting traps for hares. They are gathering edible plants. Their smaller, leaner bodies require fewer calories to maintain. They are surviving. They might even be thriving. It's not a war, it's a competition. A long, slow, grinding competition for calories on a landscape where calories are getting harder to find. In this scenario, the generalist beats the specialist. The Neanderthals weren't stupid or inferior. They were superbly adapted to a world that was vanishing from beneath their feet. Their specialization became a fatal trap. A lack of food driven by climate change and amplified by competition from a more flexible rival likely doomed them. They slowly starved out, valley by valley, until they were gone. But the Neanderthals aren't the only other humans in our family tree. Let's go back even further to a true giant of human evolution, Homo erectus. If the Neanderthals were a success, Homo erectus was a dynasty. They were around for nearly 2 million years. Think about that. 2 million years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, has only been around for about 300,000 years. This civilization is only a few thousand years old. Homo erectus was an evolutionary masterpiece of longevity. They were the first of our ancestors to look recognizably human in their body plan. They had long legs, short arms, and a body built for walking and running long distances. They were the first to leave Africa, spreading all across Asia. They were incredibly successful. And yet, they also disappeared. Why? Could it have been about food here too? The story of Homo erectus is a bit different. It seems to be less about specialization and more about complacency. For that immense span of nearly 2 million years, their main tool was the Acheulean hand axe. It was a teardrop-shaped, all-purpose tool. You could use it to butcher an animal, chop wood, dig for roots. It was the Swiss Army knife of the Paleolithic, and it was a great invention. But the strange thing is they never really improved upon it. For over 1 million years, they made the same tool in the same way. There was very little innovation. Recent studies have suggested that Homo erectus might have had a least effort strategy. They tended to make their tools from whatever rock was lying around, even if it was poor quality. They didn't seem to go out of their way to find better materials. They did what was good enough. This mindset might have extended to their food gathering. For hundreds of thousands of years in a relatively stable environment, good enough was, well, good enough. They had a working strategy for getting food, and they stuck with it. They were successful because their environment didn't demand more from them. But, just like with the Neanderthals, the climate eventually changed. In their last strongholds, like on the island of Java in Indonesia, the environment shifted. The open woodlands they were used to were replaced by dense tropical rainforest. This would have been a massive shock to their way of life. The animals they were used to hunting would have disappeared, replaced by faster, more elusive forest creatures. The plant foods would have been different. The entire landscape would have become alien. To survive in a rainforest requires a whole new set of tools and strategies. You need different hunting techniques. You need to know how to find food in a dense, three-dimensional world of trees and thick undergrowth. It requires innovation and adaptability. Did Homo erectus have that? The evidence suggests maybe not. After 1 million years of doing things the same way, they may have been cognitively stuck. Their least effort strategy, which had served them so well for so long, became their downfall. When faced with a radical change that made their old food gathering methods obsolete, they couldn't adapt. They couldn't invent the new tools or develop the new behaviors needed to survive. They didn't die in a single dramatic event. They likely just slowly faded away. Their population dwindled as food became harder and harder to secure. They were trapped by their own past success. A lack of food, caused by environmental change, exposed a fatal lack of flexibility. This brings us back to us, Homo sapiens. If a lack of food or the inability to adapt to a changing menu was so dangerous, why did we survive when others didn't? What was so special about us? As we saw with the Neanderthals, our key advantage was our generalist diet. But it was more than just being willing to eat anything. It was about the mental and social tools we used to get that food. Our species is defined by intense creativity and innovation. When we faced a new problem, we invented a new solution. We didn't just stick with the hand axe. We created a vast and varied toolkit. We made tiny, sharp stone blades that could be set into spears or used as knives. We invented harpoons for hunting large marine animals. We made fishhooks from bone. We wove baskets to carry gathered plants, which made collecting small food items much more efficient. Each of these inventions was a response to a specific problem of getting food. Each one opened up a new food source that was previously unavailable or too difficult to get. This technological dynamism gave us a buffer against environmental change. If one food source failed, we had the tools and the know-how to exploit another. But our most powerful tool might have been social. Homo sapiens lived in larger, more complex social groups than other hominins. And crucially, we maintained connections between these groups. We had social networks. Imagine a group of our ancestors living in a valley. A sudden cold snap kills off the local deer population. They are facing starvation, but a few days walk away over the mountains is another group. Maybe they are related by marriage. They send a runner. The runner comes back with news the deer are gone here, but on the coast, the seals are plentiful this year. So the group packs up and moves to the coast, or they trade with the coastal group, exchanging high-quality stone for dried seal meat. This ability to share information and resources over a wide area is a phenomenally powerful survival strategy. It buffers a local group against a local disaster. If your food runs out, you can rely on your neighbors. The Neanderthals seem to have lived in smaller, more isolated groups. They didn't have these wide-ranging social networks. If their local food source failed, they had no one to turn to. They had to solve the problem on their own, or die. Our complex social lives were fueled by another unique human trait, symbolism. We painted on cave walls, we carved figurines, we wore jewelry. What does this have to do with food? It's a sign of a brain that can think in the abstract, a brain that can create shared beliefs, myths, and identities. These are the social glue that holds large groups of people together. Our shared culture, our art, our rituals, these things made it possible to trust and cooperate with people beyond our immediate family. They allowed us to build the social safety nets that got us through the hard times. So when the climate changed, when the food became scarce, we had a whole suite of advantages. We had a flexible diet, we had a dynamic, innovative technology, and we had large social networks to fall back on. We were the ultimate adapters. The story of human evolution is littered with the bones of those who couldn't adapt. It's a graveyard of failed experiments. The Paranthropus genus, for example, were hominins with massive jaws and huge molar teeth. They were specialist grinders, adapted to eating tough, fibrous plants. For 1,000,000 years, this was a great strategy. Then the climate in Africa became drier, and their preferred plants likely disappeared. Their powerful jaws, once their greatest strength, were now useless. They couldn't adapt. They went extinct. It's easy to look back with a sense of superiority. We won. We are the last humans standing. But it's important to remember that extinction is the norm. Survival is the exception. The species that failed were not dumb or weak. They were highly successful for a very long time in the environments they were adapted for. Their doom wasn't a character flaw, it was a mismatch. The world changed, and they couldn't change with it. And the pressure point, the agent of that change, was almost always food. A food crisis is an everything crisis. It puts pressure on a species' biology, its technology, its social structure, its very mind. It's the ultimate stress test. It reveals the cracks in a survival strategy. For the Neanderthals, the crack was their specialization. For Homo erectus, it might have been their conservatism. For Paranthropus, it was their over-adapted jaws. For us, so far, our generalist, innovative, and social nature has seen us through. So, could a simple lack of food have doomed them? Yes, but it's never quite that simple. It's the lack of food that forces the question. It's the empty stomach that asks, can you change? Can you adapt? Can you innovate? Can you cooperate? For most of the other human species that have ever lived, the answer, in the end, was no. Their world changed, their dinner table became empty, and they quietly faded into the long, silent night of extinction. Their story is a sobering reminder that survival is a temporary condition. The rules of the game have not changed. Eat, adapt, or be deleted.